So we're sitting in the sanctuary that looks a bit different than it did on that morning in June in 1827. So why don't you tell us what it looked like at that point in time?
Well, when the church was built, the orientation was just the reverse of what it is now. The pews faced towards that end, towards the Canal Street end, and they were all gated. There was no balcony there. There was no wall. There was a big mahogany pulpit between the two front doors, and there was a gallery and choir loft and organ at this end. Same place roughly where the organ is now. But it was just totally reversed, and that continued, and they continued to be that way until I believe it was 1875 when it was decided to turn things around. And I was told by a woman whose family had been here then that one of the reasons for the change was that people didn't like, if they were late, coming in with the whole congregation looking at them. That it was much more convenient to be able to sneak in with behind the congregation.
Yeah, that would be pretty obvious coming in late.
It would be very obvious. And perhaps ministers in those days were a little more vigorous. Maybe they shook their finger at them, I don't know.
Could be. So were the pews the same as they are today, but they had gates on them?
They had gates on them, and if you get the right light on the backs of these pews, you can see that the back of each pew is a single pine board, and you can detect the hand plane marks on it. Those did not go through a power planer. They were all hand planed, and I just have this mental image of a master carpenter and a helper out here in the spring of 1827 planing those up and building the pews and so forth.
So in 1875 everything was flipped to kind of like it is now. And were there other changes made in the sanctuary?
A lot of changes. The windows, stained glass was put in all the windows. The same windows that are here now, but they had stained glass in them. The interior was painted in dark colors. In other words, it was made into a very Victorian type thing. The ceiling, the coffered ceiling, is very much the same as it's always been, except obviously for light fixtures and sprinkler heads and so forth. And I've read someplace that Asher Benjamin was much entranced by the Pantheon in Rome, which has a coffered ceiling. And so that was one of the reasons that we have one here.
Fascinating.
Somewhere before 1875, gas lighting was installed. This was before electricity. And I'm not sure what year, there was some gas lighting, and then later, I believe for a wedding, a huge gas chandelier was installed in the very center up there where there's one light fixture now. And the electric lighting was put in 1924 when the dark colors were removed, the stained glass was taken out, and so on. So the interior has changed greatly. The pews, the coffered ceiling, those are original, but everything else has changed. Well, the panels on the side and so forth. But the colors have changed, the arrangement has changed, much has changed.
So how was the early sanctuary heated?
The only thing I've read was that at some point a stove was installed.
Would it have been at this level or down below?
No, I imagine it would have been. Down below wouldn't have done too much good, and I expect it's like stoves any place. If you're next to it, you're boiling. If you're a little ways off, you're freezing. So that got replaced eventually with a steam heating system, which in some respects is what we still have, although the present system makes steam to make hot air, to supply hot air to these registers. And one of the reasons we have pieces of carpet over the registers is because if there's a wedding in the wintertime and the furnace comes on and hot air rises, if the bride is standing right there, suddenly her wedding dress is up around her shoulders.
Not a good thing to happen. So tell us some about the evolution of the organ.
Okay. Before the church, the interior was turned around, there was an organ, again, at this end, because I mentioned there was a gallery there. And that organ was replaced sometime, I'm not sure when, but a new organ was put in, and it was so-called tracker action organ. Tracker action referring to the fact that the keys and stops and so forth actuate a series of levers and strings and so forth to open and close the valves and so forth. And that was very much into my lifetime. And in quiet passages, you could hear the click and clack. So in late 1940s, there was a desire to have a better organ. And the discussion went along the lines of, well, high-tech, better organs these days are electronic organs. And once again, the Stephens family and Anna Stearns said there will be no electric organs in our church. And so this organ that's here now is the gift of Anna and the Stephens family in memory of their parents. And it was built by the Aeolian Skinner Company in the winter of 1948 and uses many of the pipes. There are 1,100 and some odd pipes. Many of them are the pipes out of the old organ, because the organ builders said that the wooden pipes were beautifully aged and seasoned better than anything they could build with new material. The metal pipes were revoiced, so were the wooden pipes. And the pneumatic electrical control system installed, and the blower down cellar was replaced with a larger one because it's a larger organ, electrically driven. There's a 2-horsepower motor to make the air for this organ.
Now we don't see 1,100 pipes there.
No. The pipes you see here, I believe, and Jed Holland could correct me on this, 11 of those pipes are so-called speaking pipes. And that's a relatively recent development. When this organ was installed in 1948, those pipes were not speaking pipes, and they were supported with a somewhat elaborate scroll work. You can see that in some of the old pictures. And Don Rowley did not like that, thought it looked too orthodox, ornate, evangelical, something. And since the pipes were not speaking, he asked to have the pipes removed. And Bliss Woodruff designed a drape to cover the opening there. So then the question came up was, what would Anna Stearns and the Stephens family think of that? Because it was a big change.
And they had donated the organ.
They had donated the organ some years earlier.
Yep.
And I was on the church board at the time, and apparently was the youngest member of the board, and therefore the one to get slaughtered if that was going to happen. So I was assigned to go to Phillip Stephens and discuss the subject. So I made an appointment to see him down at his office at the main manufacturing company. And he was just a great gentleman. I went down, explained that the minister wanted to do this. The board had decided it was a good idea, but the board wanted to make sure that his family and Anna would be comfortable with it. And Philip visibly did not like the idea, but said, Bobby, if that's what the church wants to do, you should go ahead and do it. So we did, and George Neary, who was the treasurer in those days, and I came over here on one hot August night, reinforced with a cooler of Colt 45, and took down all the organ pipes.
Oh my gosh.
And put up a frame to hold the drape. And then some years later, Pipes went back up again, but no elaborate framework.
And you put them back up?
No, I didn't. I only took them down.
And that left us with what we see today.
That's what you see today, yeah.
Now, you've told me a little bit about the how the air over the years, how the pipes were fed.
Almost certainly the original organ had to have somebody pumping a bellows because that was the way it was done. Later on, before this present organ was put in, there was still a valve right beside the organ console labeled water motor, and that, according to my father, used penny chuck water to drive a little turbine to drive the blower. And that got replaced in 1924 when electricity was installed in the church with an electric motor driving the blower. So over the years we've had hand pump, water driven, and electric.
And you mentioned that when this organ was put in 1948, there was a discussion of electric versus mechanical. Why was that so controversial at the time?
Well, the controversy was a totally electronic organ.
Okay, without pipes.
Without any pipes whatsoever, with oscillators, tone wheels, things like that. And no, we are going to have a wind organ.
I can understand why that would be controversial.
Well, I probably would have voted the same way if the question had been put to me. But that winter, 48, I was in high school and I had the contract, if you will, to shovel out the church after snowstorms, which apparently were very frequent that winter, because every time I came over to shovel out on a weekday, when I finished, I would come in and watch the organ builders at work.
Oh.
So utterly fascinating. And I have no musical talent whatsoever, but the mechanics of the organ and the music that it makes, I think, are wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Talk a little bit about the use of the balcony.
Well, before we had a parish house, the church school, Sunday school, had to meet in here, and there was a, so to speak, a Sunday school office at the up in the balcony. There was a desk there and a big bookcase with books and pamphlets and so forth. And the kids apparently met in the balcony in different corners of the church. And in the 1924 rebuilding, and again you can see this in the old pictures, there's a room, a big room in each corner, and those, after the parish house was built, became basically closets, but they were used as Sunday school rooms along with different corners of the church and the balcony and so forth. The other use of one of those rooms, before there was any link to the parish house, was where the groom hid until it was appropriate for him to appear at weddings.
At a wedding. It's an amazing space.
So over the years, we have constructed the link to the parish house so that, and so a number of people still refer to that as the groom's room, and that's where the groom can hide.
So when obviously the RE classes couldn't meet during the service, would they typically meet before the service or after the service, or do you recall?
Well, that, again, before my time, but my understanding is that they met before the service. Now, when I was in high school, we did meet before the service, and the high school group met with the minister in his office, and that's another interesting story. When Ed Cahill became the minister, he objected to using his home as an office because he and his wife and his then young daughter just preferred not to have people tramping in and out, church business and so forth. So he asked if there could be an office in the parish house, and after much thought, since there was a downstairs toilet and two upstairs, it was decided that the ladies' toilet in the parish house could be converted to the minister's office. and again, Pearlie Fletcher. Pearlie removed all the plumbing fixtures and set it up as a church office. And there was a big closet, a very big closet across the hall, which became the church secretary's office.
Okay.
So our high school youth group met every Sunday for half, three-quarters an hour before the service with the minister in the church office. And Ed Cahill was a very important person in my life, very influential. And so I like to tell people that some of the most valuable lessons of my entire life were gotten in the ladies' toilet of the church parish house.
So how many years have you been coming to this church?
Well, I can't remember the first time I was here, but I might have been, I imagine I probably came over as a toddler at the age of 2 or something like that. So that would be 80 years.
And then maybe as a young adult you started sitting in the service?
As I say, we met with the minister before the service and then came to the service. So from probably 1945 on, I've attended services. So obviously when I was away at college and things like that. But
right.
If I was here, I attended services.
So typically we see you sitting in sort of that same spot on a Sunday morning.
Yep.
And what do you think when you come in, given the history of this church and all the things that you've seen and so forth, as you sit there and reflect on the life of this congregation?
Well, I should go back for a second. For many years, there was a chart on the back wall of the church near one of the doors that showed all the pews, and there were little labels stuck to each pew showing who sat there. And the pew where I always sit was the Sampson, Stanels, Kenny pew, and the curiosity of that is that the Sampsons, the Daniels, Staniels, and the Kennys all at one time or another lived at 21 Berkeley Street, which is the reason we all shared a pew. And I don't know where that chart has gone to. Last time I saw it, the labels had all been removed, but it's too bad we don't. I wish it was still around. So what do I do when I sit there? Well, many people count the organ pipes. I sit there when I'm bored, which I never should be, and populate the church with the people who sat there 60 years ago. There's the Whipple family right in front of me. There are the Stephenses over there. There's Anna Stearns over there, and so on and so on.
What a great sense of history.
And I guess super trivia, but the pew cushions, many years ago, didn't have foam or anything in them. They were filled with straw, and occasionally a piece of straw would penetrate and stab you in the rear.
Make you pay attention.
Make you pay attention, yeah.
Well, Bob, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your history here and giving us insight into the history of the church.
Well, my pleasure.
We hope you'll be here for many more years.
Well, I'm working on it.